Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome back to Out of the Abyss with Lot, Pip, and Jake. Fellas, today we get to kind of wrap up our first trifecta of topics. We covered a cryptid with the werewolves, we covered an alien abduction with the Hills, and now we get to the third big one, a haunting. Hauntings have been reported for so long, in so many cultures, with so many variations, that in the US alone, almost as many people believe in ghosts as believe in the biblical God, which is a big deal considering how religious the States has been. Fellas, do you have any experience with ghosts?
No personal experience with ghosts, I think.
He thinks.
I mean, I've had a couple moments. My grandparents' place where I feel like weirdly like there's someone standing behind me. I feel like a jolt. I flip around in the bed, no one there. So I can't say that it was a ghost. I felt maybe a presence. Maybe that was my young mind.
All right. So my ghost story,
Ooh.
When I was younger, I was about 9 or 10.
Lay it on me,
My
King.
grandfather and I, he was working or something, and I was with him, right? We went to this little farmhouse because he was a veterinarian, right? Went to this little farmhouse, like, kind of by Red Deer.
Mm-hmm.
And we drive in the driveway, and one of his colleagues is with him, right? We drive up to the house, and his colleague was like freaking out, being like, "Yo, you gotta watch out for this kid playing in the road. You know, just be careful, okay?" And we're like, my grandfather's like, "Yeah, for sure, no problem, right?" So then we get up to the house, and we talk to the people that live there, and I bring up his coworker was super worried about the kid in the road, and it turns out their kid had died playing in the road like a year ago or 2 years ago on that day or something, right? Which is super fucked up, because like she just said it with such fucking certainty. There was a child in the road. He was there, and you have to be careful because he's there, right? And like we just it was so like such a for sure thing that like I don't know, maybe my mind made up that there was actually a child there, but I remember there being a kid there.
Dang.
That's my only real ghost story, and it was really fucking weird, man.
That's a spicy
Yeah,
one.
it's spooky.
Yeah.
That's a pretty iconic, like, formula for ghost. I can respect that.
Yeah. Oh, and like the lady that said it too is also like one of the most motherly people I think you could ever meet in your life, right? So maybe that has something to do with it too. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it would also be freaky being the mom and hearing that and be like, "Hey, the guy said there was a kid in the road," and like you would realize, "Oh shit, that was my kid.
Yeah.
My kid's a ghost."
I don't think it was like that for her. I think I don't remember. I was fucking young, dude.
You think
I have
she
no idea
knew?
how she reacted. I don't know. No idea.
I mean, she must have if she brought it up, right? Like, if it was like, oh, they warned us about the kid playing in the road, and it's like, oh, well, actually, like, it seems like the mother already made the connection.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a spooky one.
A little weird, man.
The best that I have is that I had a couple of friends, and my one friend, his father had, his uncle had passed, and we were at his father's place, and the computer in an unattended room turned on and started playing the band Jethro Tull, which was his deceased brother's favorite band.
Huh.
And that's the best I've got. Which
Pretty
is
spooky.
yeah, it's a little spooky. I don't know if it's super convincing. I mean, I love me some Jethro Tull, but it is a little bit like when it happened, we were all like,
Huh.
Yeah. But for music that I put on myself, and not that some fucking ghost puts something.
You see, what you do is, before you die, you've got to put a script on your computer.
the ghost will record the podcast for me. No, I don't know. I can't remember what song came on, but I can tell you that I would have been a lot less spooked if it was just like that burst of flute right before the Aqua Lung. That wouldn't have been scary at all. I would have just like burst out laughing. Like
Started jamming out, dude.
Vibe check. So,
Yep.
with such a varied tapestry of stories that we get to pick from. I figured that we could start with a really famous one. So this one is the story of the Perron family haunting of the 1970s. This is the basis for the movie The Conjuring, and we actually watched The Conjuring to prepare for this, and in my opinion, not bad. Not great. Hostel was better, but not bad. Gentlemen, what'd you think?
Hostel was better, I think. Unfortunately, The Conjuring was spooky. I will admit, it was decent. Not super memorable. I think the scariest part for me though was the moment where like you actually see the girl like yanked by the ghost, by the invisible force, like halfway down the bed.
Oh yeah.
I think it was the scariest like outright manifestation of action.
Yeah, we were talking about this in the pre-show, and we kind of all came to the conclusion that like we don't really remember much of the movie just because like nothing really fucking happened for the most part, right? Until like everything happens all at once in the last like 45 minutes or something.
Yeah.
But like the actual scary part to me, or like, not even scary, the actual like ridiculous part to me is just like at the end when she's like in the basement, she's like possessed or whatever, right? And she's trying to like kill her daughter. Then she realizes, oh no, I'm not. I'm her mother and I'm trying to kill her. What am I doing? And then, you know, you could have just like actually done that like an hour before and just you as the husband talked to the fucking wife and avoided this entire situation. I don't know. That's the part that kind of threw me off.
All the bodies like falling out of the walls.
Yeah, it's like it's literally that easy, and you don't even fucking try that until like she's literally about to be murdered.
Yeah.
Like, dude,
Wait a
come on.
minute.
Like I'm just remembering pieces now as we're talking about it, just because I forgot bits of it because it seemed kind of like generic ghost story. I mean, it was good, but not like standout.
It's an interesting story just because of how like, because of the true story behind it, right?
Yeah.
But I think as a movie, it was a little tacky, dude. Maybe it's just the time period or something.
I don't know. I feel like part of it was the fact they had to tack in like a second B side to the movie with the doll and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
weird.
true. That's true. I kind of forgot about that part.
It seemed gratuitous. You don't need that.
It was an average movie with below average plot and just a lot of setups for sequels and spin-offs, which they really ran with this.
How very Hollywood.
Yeah, because they did The Conjuring 2 and they did Annabelle and they did The Nun, which is another one, and
I didn't know the Nun. Sorry, I didn't know the Nun was related to that. Actually.
yeah, I think it's one of the spirits from the
I
second
think I'm
one.
familiar with the Nun.
It's pretty B movie,
I do like B movies though.
but it's just in the same universe. It's like a newer one. The Conjuring 5, The Nun, if you are wondering about the quality of the movie.
Oh, yeah, that says enough right there.
Yeah, that's it, dude.
So
Syndicated.
So to begin with the movie, I'm going to give a real brief synopsis so that we can compare. So to begin the movie, the Perron family moved into a new home, a lovely farmhouse, where surely nothing is wrong and all is well. The eldest daughter, Andrea, does not seem pleased about the move. The family files in with brief introductions being made to the different characters. The father, Roger, the mother, Carolyn, and the daughters, in order from eldest to youngest, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April. Now, despite the cheerful screams of children exploring a new place, the family dog does not want to enter the house. It just stands outside and looks at them. Rather than wrestle with this moderate-sized animal, they leave it outside for the night, because the 70s were a different time. It's like, fuck it, just leave the dog outside. The next morning, they send little April out to go get the dog and bring her in for breakfast. Whoops, turns out dog's dead. No trauma, nothing like that, just dead. But they bury the dog and just start unpacking. They just keep on trucking. We got stuff to do.
I feel like that wasn't even that big a part of the movie either, right? It was just like, oh shit, dog's dead. Okay, all right.
Do we know? I think I asked during the watching, but I don't remember what the answer was. Do we know if the actual was a dog death in the true story of events?
Sort of, but it wasn't really tied in. That night, Cindy begins to sleepwalk, walking into Andrea's room and banging her head on the wardrobe on the far side of the room, which is pretty creepy. And
Yeah.
Sure.
these phenomena combined are enough to send Carolyn looking for help. Kind of a hair trigger on this lady, and she finds the moderately famous couple, Ed and Lorraine Warren, demonologists, and honestly, the real main characters of the movie. I feel like they get fleshed out way more than any other characters.
Yeah.
So after some tearful...
The actual haunting is just set dressing for these folks to come in and be spectacular.
Yeah, which is so wild to me. After some tearful begging, they agree to come visit. Lorraine professes to be psychic, and immediately she can tell something's wrong with the house. Which is like, gee, Lorraine, like the family's all sleeping together in the living room because they're terrified of nighttime. Are you sure something's up with the house?
The mother came to you fucking bawling about her children. Yep, probably everything is probably fine there. Don't worry about that.
I'm so fucking
That's all in her
scared.
head.
I'm so fucking scared. I think something is wrong with this house. The vibe's off.
Wow, what a psychic.
There's a presence here that appears to be scaring them.
Yep.
So, Lorraine is exploring, and she discovers a little nook behind that wardrobe that Cindy had been walking up to and banging her head on. So she opens the wardrobe, she looks in, finds this little nook. She crawls into it and just falls through the fucking floor, sliding all the way down to the cellar, using like the space between walls, which for some reason isn't insulated. And I need to know, is that an American thing? Is that a 1970s thing? What the fuck is that? Why is there no insulation in the house?
I had a while where I was super obsessed with like secret passages, and yeah, that's just like an old American building thing, where they would have like those really thin boards, and they just plaster over them and have just like big air gaps as insulation.
Wow, that sounds terrible.
Yeah,
Where what? This was like Maine or something.
Yeah,
right?
this is
was,
New
like,
England.
Northern United States. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say maybe it's like a southern thing, but that's not true.
where all the pipes and stuff were.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild.
But she's down there in the cellar, and she's confronted with the vision of this mad ghost who's this crazy lady who in life had been possessed and forced to murder her own children. Suitably upset by this. Lorraine posits from all of this information and several visions and a couple of vibe checks that the head honcho Espirito is the ghost of a witch named Bathsheba. Bathsheba's whole MO is to possess the mother of a family and then use that mother to murder the children of the family. Unfortunately, while Lorraine is having these revelations, while she's getting this supervillain monologue, Bathsheba is actually already in the process of possessing Carolyn, who is trying to nap, by creeping up on the sleeping woman, pinning her arms, and then vomiting a ton of blood into her mouth. It's super gross.
That's fucking hot.
Is that how ghost possession works?
That's exactly how ghost possession works.
Yeah.
I was just
You
thinking
really
about
possessed,
it.
dude?
No, but I mean, I was just thinking about
Do you
like
want
all the. Oh shit! Now there's a pickup line. Once this is all once the pandemic's over, baby, going to the bar, asking to possess some ladies.
That sounds like it will get you arrested.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, in any capacity at all, after having said it, yeah.
You just gotta own it, dude. You can make it work, I believe.
Now, the family retreats to a hotel, while Ed and Lorraine go to the local priest to try and get an exorcism, because even though Lorraine knows that this lady is probably possessed, and they're getting an exorcism, they still trust them around the kids. I don't know. It wasn't a great movie. They're told that because the family isn't Catholic, the exorcist is going to need approval from the Vatican. They're going to have to go all the way to the top.
I remember when we were watching it and this scene happened, I was just so confused. I'm like, okay, this ghost possesses the mother to kill their children, and you're just leaving the fucking mother there with the ghost of this thing in it, being like, you're fine, don't worry about it.
She's like all petting.
I saw that one twist coming like 4 miles away too. Like, oh, it's too dangerous. We're gonna have to perform the exorcism ourselves. Moments later, boom. We're gonna have to perform the exorcism ourselves.
They
twist.
They do that a lot. Yeah, the exorcism thing, like, planning the exorcism was super confusing to me because Lorraine's in a panic. She's like, oh my god, she uses the mother to kill the child. She uses the mother to kill the child. And she's like freaking out. And then she runs upstairs and Carolyn's just like, no, I'm fine, with like this fake smile. And Lorraine's just like, oh, okay, good. Would you mind looking after the kids while we go book you an exorcism?
Yeah, exactly. I was watching it, I'm like, don't do it! Stay! What are you doing?
Incredible content. Anyways,
Oh,
by the
God.
time they return to the motel, shocking everyone, Carolyn is missing. She's taking Christine and April back to the house to kill them. Yeah, I know, we're all shocked. And side note, I never understood this. Why the house? Like, Bathsheba is never said to be buried there. She just lived there, so why the connection? What's up with that?
Well,
Just a hangout spot,
I think
dude.
that she was hung on the big ominous tree on the property. I think was part of it, right? Was the vision?
Was it?
Was that a thing?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it was.
I thought she hung a child there or something. I thought that was the point of the tree.
I think Bathsheba like killed a kid and then hung herself to hail Satan, and at one point the psychic falls into the basement and is haunted by like the hanging body of Bathsheba.
Those feet.
Yeah, those ominous
Yeah, those
levitating
feet,
toes.
Whatever happens, the Warrens do
End of the
arrive in
episode?
time to stop Carolyn from... End of the episode. Good night, everybody. The Warrens arrive in time to stop the attempted filicide. Now, this is also fucked up and over the top that Ed's just like, fuck it, I'm doing the exorcism myself. And I just feel the need to interject and just say, don't do that. I'm not even going to get into, like, are exorcisms real? Like, is that a thing? That's a conversation for another time. But I'll tell you this, that if you're talking about, like, the Catholic exorcism, like, reading from the Bible, in nomine Dei, like, casting out spirits, Catholic doctrine says that you need the authority of Christ to perform an exorcism, and that the authority of Christ is invested and divested by the Catholic Church, and the Church alone. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not here to argue the veracity of exorcisms or possessions. But in the belief systems from which exorcisms spring, you need to be an ordained member of the Catholic Church, acting under the authority of the Pope, to actually make it work. Otherwise, you're just pissing it off.
Also, if you're just gonna do an amateur exorcism and you don't know what you're doing, you've never done it before, what if it really is something you need to exercise? You really think you're ready for that? I wouldn't be.
Yeah, it seems imprudent at best.
Let's watch a YouTube video, man. It'll be fun.
There you go.
Hey,
I
everybody.
got a pre-recorded exorcism.
Can't wait for that 3-minute
Oh, yeah.
that 3-minute video. Hey everybody, I'm Father Jackie here to show you how to perform a real quick exorcism.
In 3 easy steps.
Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more exorcisms like this one.
I can see the thumbnail, dude. Damn it.
A ghost was in my wife?
Incredible exorcism prank.
Top 10 exorcism fails.
Oh,
You'd be like a
no.
Mr.
You got
Beast.
yakety sax in the background as people are floating around the room.
Fucking heads turning, fucking vomit coming out. Yeah, dude.
It'd be like the Mr. Beast video. It'd be like, I give 1,000 demons $10 each. All right. So they do this exorcism, and it's this epic battle, and he's screaming in Latin, and the chair is levitating, and the husband is being like, I love you, and it's all dramatic, and eventually they pull it off, and all is well. They win the day. What a hooray. And there was much rejoicing. So, what's, I mean, I guess we kind of already got everybody's thoughts. That was a pretty forgettable movie. It was a little spooky.
Yeah?
It wasn't very scary. It was sort of just generic. And you know what? Like,
Cheesier
what the
than it
fuck are
needed
the?
to be.
Yeah, and the Warrens as characters and I guess as people, it was kind of not interesting to watch do anything. You know?
Yeah, they just did a lot of like standing around looking serious.
Yeah, being dramatic. And being
If I
like, oh
hadn't...
no,
Yeah.
you know.
If I hadn't, watched the movie and seen ghostly shit happening within the movie, I would have been like, these people are getting scammed. If they had that vibe to them, if that, like, they were trying to put too much of a show on with it.
Yeah.
Weren't the Warrens in real life kind of like that, though? Like a little scammy?
Yeah.
That's why it's based on a true story.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's something that I'll touch a little more on at the end. But yeah.
Okay.
This movie actually got a lot of acclaim because the director James Wan consulted with Lorraine Warren during its production. And Andrea Perron herself said that outside of a few creative liberties, it was basically correct. Also interesting, there's scenes where Ed is lecturing. Lorraine Warren is actually one of the people in the crowd. She has like a Stan Lee style cameo in The Conjuring.
An extra. That's fun. You think she shows up in all the other Conjuring sequels? Just in the background?
I don't know, but I would
Conjuring
honestly
5,
respect
The
it.
Nun.
They take off the nun's face paint, and it's just Lorraine Warren. And I would have gotten away with it, too. Wasn't for you damn kids and the meddling animorphs.
Oh, God.
Yes, you do.
We can't do it. We can't let that be our brand.
It 100% already is, man. Hate to break it to you.
Yeah, we kind of broke ground with Animorphs deep in the cut.
Yeah,
so.
this is their podcast. We just borrowed it.
Can't wait to pay Applegate AI royalties.
Yeah, when are we doing the Animorph episode?
Oh, soon.
Animorph canon. Dude.
Soon.
What is it?
Just be 12 hours of me just rampaging, just ranting, just sweaty and looking into the camera. It's going to be excellent. It's going to be top tier content. Now, it's kind of weird that Andrea Perron said that the movie was basically correct because Andrea's version of events is way different. I went through her self-published trilogy, House of Darkness, House of Light, which covered the events as she remembers them. And I'm going to try not to let my opinion of her writing interfere with my covering of some of these events coming out of the books, but this is really bad writing. This is bad.
I must say, though, kind of a good name, right?
I mean, I guess
Sure.
it's not.
House of Light. It's kind of evocative.
Yeah,
I
but
don't know where the light is in that, though.
it's not particularly inspired. Like that's just like that.
Some dark shit happened to that house, dude. It's a house of darkness. Bam. There you go.
That's something that like a name generator online would come up with.
Yeah, I mean, it could be way worse, I'm sure.
Yeah, but
It could always be
I just
worse.
think opening your book with a bunch of Bible quotes and then an Ovid quote is something that you should only do if you think that the authors of those seminal texts wouldn't be fucking embarrassed to read your wordplay. She even got cutesy with the chapter titles, like Let There Be Light, or Creature Discomforts, or Bless This Mess, which were some of my favorites. It's got that David Foster Wallace, like, aw shucks, aren't I clever? Feeling, except without actually being clever enough to come off as endearing, so it just reads flat. Not a fan.
Right.
Creature Discomfort sounds like a C-grade slasher. Although I do kind of dig the wordplay, but I'm a sucker for, like, a cheap joke.
Yeah, you really are, though.
Yeah.
Now, according to Andrea, things kicked off in 1970. She literally started the book, like, a year before anything actually happened. The parents acquired a dog that they named Bathsheba, a name seemingly plucked out of nowhere.
What? Did this actually happen?
Yeah.
Hold on.
Wait, really?
This was Andrea Perron's account. This is from the mouth of the eldest daughter in her book.
I feel like it's already lost credibility in my mind. How you get to name your dog after a ghost that is going to possess your family a year or so later?
Also, remember that Bathsheba is a biblical
Fate.
name. Yeah,
Is
it?
Yeah, that was David's wife.
Oh.
Oh.
So
I look at this word and I just see Bethesda, dude. I honestly could not,
It's
not see it.
visually very close to a poorly spelled
Yeah.
Bethesda.
But yeah, I mean, no, it is a biblical name. So
Okay. All right. I thought it was just like a very weird random name, but I didn't know it was actually like a thing.
I feel you. But yeah, they had the
Slightly
dog.
more believable coincidence.
They had the dog just long enough to really fall in love with it when some local teenagers accidentally smoked it with a car, killing it right in front of the kids.
Okay.
Oh.
Then, right, so they're dealing with this trauma. Some local boys break into their house, killing their cats and dumping motor oil all over the pantries and in the freezers and just spoiling all of the food.
What?
Uh-huh.
This incident led the family to a pretty somber time of mourning, which lasted all of a few weeks before Andrea, who was out and about one day, found the boys that were rumored to be responsible. She proceeded to absolutely chimp out on these kids, beating them so badly that Carolyn was legitimately worried for her daughter's mental health. Although I think that beating the crap out of some kids is an appropriate response if they killed your cat.
And dog?
Yeah, actually, though.
Well, the dog thing was like an
And
accident. That was unrelated. It was
Okay,
just...
I wasn't sure if it was like the same kids.
No, that was just like some teenagers were just like cruising and they turned a corner too fast and smoked the dog.
But I'll come back for the cat.
The mental health of Andrea wasn't really helped by the fact that, man, the parents had some really shitty neighbors. Their elderly neighbor actually had a heart attack in the driveway, which for some reason his widow blamed on Carolyn. In fact,
What?
yeah, the widow actually called Carolyn a witch and rejected her offer of some freshly baked apology cake, which is like, what the fuck? Always take the cake.
Why?
I don't know. I have no...
I mean, that house must have had like a local reputation or something, right?
Well, they said
If as soon as a family moves in, then everyone's like, fuck those guys.
they lived there for a while. This was like their family home they'd grown up in. But they did have a big stone thing out front of their house that they used to joke looked like a tombstone. And Andrea thinks maybe that's why people said that Carolyn was a witch and like were really down. But that's like, what? That's such a tiny thing. Anyways,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's an idea though. When I die, bury me in the front yard,
yes,
tombstone and all,
I'm burying you at
like a
your
lawn
house.
gnome. Keep my ashes in a lawn gnome.
One
the lawn.
arm sticking up out of the dirt.
Absolutely.
You ate that like crooked wrist though. Yep.
Yeah, dude. Just the bones. Half of a ironic T-shirt.
But so as you guys can imagine, these guys wanted to move pretty bad at this point. They couldn't really afford it, but man, they wanted a fresh start. Eventually, Carolyn found an ad in the paper, and this ad was for a 9-room colonial farmhouse with a barn and 200 acres of land for $75,000. Even in the 70s, that's a good price.
That's a good deal, though. I would take that deal.
Oh yeah, in fact, that's a suspiciously good deal. But Carolyn was so taken with it that she just dropped $500 down as a deposit for the place. This is their entire life savings, minus a little bit for milk and bread. And she didn't tell her husband a word about it. She just went and did it.
That
Hey
is a
honey,
little
how was
fucked
your
up.
day? Oh, it was great. What'd you do today? Oh, I just put a down payment on the house that we're moving to. Yep, but start packing.
Yeah.
Surprise, we're moving. I mean, listen, the deal's so good. Like, that's a lot of property, right? I mean, even if the house sucks, you could just camp on, like, the far end of the property,
I guess.
I mean, you just resell it.
hypothetically.
But
Yeah.
she was in luck, because despite the fight that initially cropped up when she revealed that little tidbit of having completely changed the course of their lives forever without even asking his consent, the place was every bit as lovely as she'd imagined. Everybody loved it. They went for a viewing. They were greeted by the home's elderly occupant, Mr. Kenyon. Mr. Kenyon gave the kids some candy and let them play on the property while the adults went for a stroll in that early autumn warmth.
Oh,
Yeah,
picturesque.
and Andrea does paint a really pretty picture here. A forest with a river running through it, trees forming corridors overhead with their interlocking branches and colorful oak and maple leaves, fish in the water, frogs on the beach, and birds singing in the air. The sweet smell of a New England autumn in the countryside. Roger even loosened up and went to wade in the river, enjoying the thought of some fishing and relaxing during the height of the summer next year. In fact, Roger liked the place so much he was a little bit scared of it, because he'd never wanted to go back somewhere so badly before. And he'd have to pine for a little bit longer because they didn't end up moving until January of 1971. They
That
arrived...
sounds like a great place, though. That's a good deal. I'd still go.
Yeah.
No, nobody talk about the ghost.
Listen,
Everyone just forget that's a thing
Everyone
right
be
now,
cool.
okay?
even if you knew ahead of time there was a ghost, would you still go?
Probably.
I don't know.
I don't know. Listen, I'm not a mom, nor
Depends if
do I
knew
have
that
any
ghost was
kids.
gonna like kill my fucking children or not, though. You know.
I don't line up with the ghost
Pretty
MO
big.
at all. It's just a bad roommate at that point.
The ghost shows up to scare Rick, and it's like screaming about like, she made me do it, and Rick's like, yeah, that's tight. Anyways, you can make out the money order for rent to Pip. That's Pip Leather at. So they arrived just as Mr. Kenyon was moving his last few boxes out of the house. Roger recalls that he got one cryptic piece of advice from him as he was leaving. Mr. Kenyon said, for the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night. Spooky.
Ted
My
Spooky.
greatest weakness: a light that is on.
The ghost enters the room, a night light, and just withers away.
What? Isn't there some kind of like lore about that though? Like ghosts can't manifest as well in bright light. I feel like I've read that somewhere, but I can't source it.
I feel like that's just the wisdom of all of us as kids being scared of the dark and just having that natural instinct of like, oh no, it's fine if the light is on.
Yeah, they can't get me under the covers, dude.
Yeah. So winter was in full swing by the time they started to get set up, and this winter was a pretty bad one. It seems obvious reading the accounts that the parents were totally unprepared for the isolation of wintering in a farmhouse. They had no idea what this entailed, and it definitely didn't help that Mr. Kenyon had, for reasons unknown, barricaded all the fireplaces in the home. And every time Carolyn tried to ask him about it, he would just evade the question. Totally normal.
Oh yeah, I'm remembering now how the movie went where they found the actual furnace because they were looking for a way to be warm.
Once, while Mr. Kenyon and Carolyn were discussing curiosities of the property, things like an old cellar hole and a giant piece of granite covering an abandoned well, he suddenly got very serious and asked if everything in the house had been okay since they moved in. She told him that everything was fine, because it was. They'd just moved into a drafty farmhouse, nothing odd here. But that started to change. Roger was working as a traveling salesman, and the 4 oldest girls were in school, which meant that Carolyn spent most days at home with little April. April would play upstairs, and Carolyn would do her cleaning and cooking and laundry and all that upkeep that you have to do when you are the sole parent taking care of 5 kids. Listening to the little girl talk and laugh and push toys around. So Carolyn was really disturbed when she was cutting vegetables on the counter, listening to April singing upstairs. She turns around and she sees her daughter standing right behind her playing with her little doll. So, like, who was singing upstairs? And this kind of thing became a regular occurrence for Carolyn and for the girls, hearing voices around the house where no one was. They would try a bunch of times to recreate the sounds by going to different areas of the house and making noises to try to, like, create echoes, but they never could duplicate those kinds of sound effects.
That one's a bit spooky.
A little bit. Carolyn began to develop a paranoia that someone else was in the house. The noises were too regular. They started sounding like footsteps or doors opening or drawers being shut, even when no one was in the rooms that the sounds were coming from. Once, April even burst out of her room mid-nap, claiming that someone had shoved her roughly off the bed, waking her up. And at first, the other girls kind of teased her for it, until April started to get really upset that no one believed her and started crying. And that made everyone uncomfortable, because, like, this is the kind of thing that you want the kid to be making up. Everyone's in the room having, like, hot chocolate and cookies, and the one little girl who was asleep in the room alone comes out asking who the hell shoved her off the bed. I don't put too much stock. I don't put too much stock in, like, toddlers' memories and what they're saying, but this is starting to freak Carolyn out, all of this coming on.
Right.
To add to Carolyn's stress, flies begin to appear. First 1, then 2. Odd, considering how cold and drafty the house had been all winter. Finally, so many flies were in the house that Roger, who was home from a trip, made it his mission to destroy them. He bought a swatter for each room and began his battle. No dice.
Arm yourself.
Damn,
Yeah.
that's a commitment though.
Yeah, like a gunslinger but with fly swatters. And also bad.
I must say
Fly
from
slingers.
like fly slinger, pretty good. I can say from experience though that flies, if you don't wipe them out, they will just winter over in your house.
Yeah.
It's true.
There was no dice on him taking care of these flies like that. There was just too many for some swatters. Roger and Carolyn eventually agreed to call an exterminator, because this was starting to get kind of gross. The exterminator arrived, and nothing. He got there, and there was no flies in the house. So he applied a toxic spray anyways to the walls to prevent flies from getting in, and then he left. By the afternoon of this same day, the house was filled with flies again, everywhere. In fact,
I would be so mad.
Yeah, Roger noted that the exterminator seemed only to have pissed the flies off.
They evolved, dude.
Yeah, and the war.
Oh my god, the flies are now capable of anger.
And the war with the flies actually started to have an effect on Roger. He'd storm around the house screaming at the bugs, swatting violently. The girls couldn't even eat dinner in peace. Their dad would literally stomp around the table killing bugs while they tried to eat. Yeah, like he started going nuts.
Bugs in a house.
When Carolyn confronted him
Snakes
about
on a plane.
when Carolyn confronted him about this, they had a screaming match that segued into her divulging all of the experiences that she'd been having. And upon hearing about the phantom noises and the cold spots and the awful smells, he finally told his wife about Mr. Kenyon's ominous advice regarding the lights.
Wait, she didn't know about this until now? I feel like it's a pretty, important thing. Like, hey, honey, I'm never home, right? Because traveling salesman, but make sure you keep a light on for the ghost. Like, that never came up? Not even once?
If he takes you aside, it's just a crazy old man, right? Crazy old man says keep the lights on. What do he know? He's probably senile. We got this house for a song.
Alright. So, another point, counterpoint to my point. You as the wife, wouldn't you be like, oh man, there's some shit going on here. I better tell my husband about it. But then again, she didn't tell him that she was buying the house. So maybe she didn't give a fuck?
You know,
I don't know. I mean, she told him about all the stuff that was going on, and he was like, oh, hey, that reminds me. The guy said we should leave the lights on for some reason. And then maybe it all starts to click.
This is like a period of time after it started happening, right? You figured you'd be like, yo, babe, some fucked up shit happened in the house today. You figured that would just happen, right?
Well, Roger was gone for weeks at a time as a salesman. And then he'd come back for a couple of days and visit and then take off again.
You got phones?
Did they have phones? It was the 70s, so it's not like he had a cell phone or anything.
You got payphones,
Sure, but
I
you still have you still have access to a telephone, right? I don't know. I feel like most of this could have been mitigated by communicating. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I feel like most problems in any stories, if people just communicated better, everything would have gone so much smoother.
Yeah, I feel like their relationship was already in trouble.
Yeah.
Yep.
That ghost is a homewrecker.
The conversation that they had seems to change something in the house, because over the next few weeks, the flies just started to disappear. And Lorraine Warren, years later, would warn that the flies were there for a reason, as a harbinger. She would tell Carolyn, you can't really kill what's already dead. Lovecraft disagrees. Now, before I move past that winter, I want to recount a little incident that Carolyn had a couple weeks after moving in. She'd gone to check out the barn, a beautiful structure with beams that had been hand-hewn by a master shipwright. This building had survived storms and inclement weather for literally decades, and it was gorgeous. She went to marvel at it while the children were at school. They were all bundled up in their coats and scarves, taken off. She was standing just staring into this building, gorgeous. She steps inside, and she hears a noise above her, and her first thought was that it was a bird, and she flinched down. But she looked up and she realized that it was a hand scythe, like what you would use for cutting grain. One of those shorter ones, like Mavado's hook swords in Mortal Kombat.
Oh, nice.
And this hand scythe was spinning as if someone had grabbed the handle and thrown it like a boomerang, like with that flick of the wrist, and it floated overhead, defying gravity, before coming down, slashing her across the neck and shoulder and hitting the ground. Thankfully, her winter clothes, especially a leather overcoat that she'd donned, had prevented any actual physical damage from being done to her, but I can see how this would upset someone.
I would spook me. That's a shame. It sounds like a sick barn, dude.
Yeah. Later, Carolyn would do a bunch of research into the history of the farm, and among the deaths that she claimed that she found on the farm was one of Mrs. John Arnold, who had hanged herself from the precise beam in the farm from which the scythe had fallen.
Okay. Fair enough.
Eventually, after they'd lived there for a couple months, Carolyn decided to bust open the fireplaces, and this really seemed to open the floodgates for more visceral spectral activities. She went to work that day, crushing the plaster and the stone cover in each one, and after several hours, she called it a day. The family had a visitor, elderly Mrs. Pettigrew, a neighbor from a nearby farmhouse, who'd come to bring a cake and say hi. Carolyn excused herself to wash off the plaster dust, go have a shower, while Andrea, the eldest daughter, made coffee for everybody. But when Carolyn stepped out of the shower and reached for some fresh clothes, something really weird happened. A hanger lifted off of the wardrobe beside the hanger that she was reaching for and began, of its own volition, viciously beating Carolyn about the head and neck. She screamed, and all the kids ran to her, witnessing this. All the kids attested that this was a thing that had happened. Mrs. Pettigrew, the neighbor, left in a hurry. She was like, yeah, I left my stove on. I gotta go. But as she was leaving...
It seems like you guys are busy here. I'll leave you to it.
Tonight's hockey night in Canada. I really gotta get out of here.
Have fun with the hanger thing.
She did, though, remind Carolyn that the Kenyans had always left the lights in the farmhouse on all night, every night. And this, right here, this event is the thing that spurs that whole sleeping together in the living room thing from the movie. Where in the movie this happened on, like, the second night. This was after, like, months of living there. Carolyn busted open the fireplace. Shit started getting real. They all got real freaked out.
I don't understand the connection between the fireplaces and the increase in spectral activity.
Me neither. The only connection I can find is the fact that, like, Mr. Kenyon wouldn't answer why he had it all boarded up in this freezing farmhouse. And then after they busted them down the same day, all of a sudden everything kicked into high gear.
The fireplace is her power.
I guess. Maybe the ghosts were burned in there? Well, wait, no, wasn't the...
You stuck them in there and fucking plastered it up, dude.
Wasn't
Now
there...
you can't leave. Haha. I win.
No, wait, wasn't that part of the story? There was like a necromancer?
No. You're thinking of a different movie.
I don't think so.
You're thinking of A Haunting in Connecticut.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. Now, it's important to note that other than the flies and the drafts in the house, Roger had no idea why everyone was acting so scared all the time. Like, he had a couple of stories, sure, about like, oh, there's weird sounds and, oh, there's weird smells, but he'd never witnessed anything. He wasn't home for literally weeks at a time, so he missed all the activity. He just got home, all happy to be home, and everyone was all scared walking on eggshells, and he was like, what the fuck is going on? Like...
That'd be a weird experience.
Yeah,
dude.
and it was really pressure in the marriage, and it wasn't helped at all by the fact that he and his wife disagreed on the Vietnam War. He thought it was great, she thought it was awful, they fought about it all the time. It was not good times when he was home. They started changing. Carolyn became quiet and insouciant, while Roger would storm around the house, screaming things like, "This house smells like death," for seemingly no reason, which is fucking horrifying. These kids were spooked.
Yelling about bugs, yelling about smells. My God, this man.
And the fear was not helped by the emergence of more spirits in the house. Some of them were friendly. Like, one of the spirits in the house would sweep up the kitchen, leaving, like, little dirt piles to be collected. It's nice.
Oh.
There's another one.
That's a chill ghost.
Yeah, dude. That's a good roommate. Another ghost named Manny was viewed by all the children, and it was a little boy who would watch the girls play, but if you made direct eye contact with him, he would fade away into nothing. But he always left a warm, comfortable feeling. The kids all felt like he protected them from the pervasive chill and fear of the house.
He just likes to watch.
And he's just hanging out. Other spirits...
Just chilling, man. Don't worry about
Other
it.
spirits were a little bit darker. Some would throw things or slam the phone receiver. Some would darken the house while Roger and Carolyn fought, as if feeding on the negativity.
So they did have a phone.
They did have a phone at the house. Another pair would stand on the steps, looking out as though surveying their fields. But at night, Carolyn would wake up to see that same pair, seemingly a father-son, in her bedroom, chanting a ritual and holding flames in their hands, all while making the room freezing cold. Different spirits would appear at different
Okay.
times, mostly after twilight. There was a small child that would appear right at dawn in the corner of Cindy's room, crying for her mother and curling up on the ground weeping. She would disappear as the sun rose up, but at dusk she would reappear, wandering the halls and wailing. Most of the phenomena just stopped when Roger was home, which made him more and more convinced that everyone was just acting crazy.
I mean, if you're an evil force orchestrating all that kind of terror, that's kind of the one thing you do, right? Is you pick one person to not haunt and just create division.
Your control group.
Sure.
Yeah.
But eventually Roger had his own experience. Carolyn had been complaining that the wrought iron door to the laundry room kept swinging open unaided, even when latched. Roger laughed it off and he tied a little twine around it, effectively locking the latch closed. And he told Carolyn that her busting open of the fireplaces had unbalanced the floor, causing the door frame to shift. That doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
dude.
Makes even less sense because before he was even finished talking, the door snapped open again. He turned around to take a look, and he found that the twine was already worn and snapped, as if sawed by a very dull blade. He was also suddenly hit by the stench of rotting meat. Horrified, he searched the laundry room for the culprit. He figured it was a dead fox or something, long dead but with enough juicy corners left to really stink. But he couldn't find anything. He spent literally days looking for the source of the smell that would come and go and could not find anything. Then he left, and activity really ramped up. Beds would lift up into the air at 5:15 a.m. exactly, dumping everyone on the floor. The smell of rotting flesh would
It's the best alarm clock ever, dude.
up and at him.
Well, I guess that's the start of your day, eh?
The smell of rotting flesh would fill rooms at random, and one spirit kept telling young Cindy that, and I quote, 7 dead soldiers are buried in the walls of the house. There was even one spirit that no one in the family to this day will elaborate on. The only thing Andrea will say about it is, let's just say there was a very bad male spirit in the house, with 5 little girls. At this Yeah. At this point, a particular spirit began appearing to Carolyn. It would be at her bedside at night watching her. It was elderly, with a desiccated and wrinkled face that insects would crisscross freely coming out of one wrinkle and crossing the face and climbing into another, and a head that was tilted at one side at just a wrong angle, as though with a snapped neck. The spirit, Carolyn said, was Bathsheba Sherman. Carolyn claimed that information at the library had shown that Bathsheba was a woman who'd been accused of infanticide via sewing needle, and despite being cleared of this charge, had then lost 4 other children she had had, none over the age of 5. Bathsheba would slap and pinch Carolyn, telling her to get out of the house. When she learned that Carolyn was afraid of fire, she started to threaten to burn the house down as well. Finally, Carolyn was woken up from a nap with a sharp pain in her thigh. She looked down and had a large puncture wound in her leg, bleeding freely as though from a sewing needle.
Yikes.
Fuck, dude.
Yeah, starting to ramp up a little,
Dang,
hey?
how you go around telling the ghosts your fear, though?
Sorry, what?
How do you go around telling the ghost your fear? Like, how did the ghost learn of your fears? It seems like...
I don't know. They
Bit of a
literally
blunder.
haunt your house. I'm sure you talk about, hey, I'm kind of afraid of fire. I'm sure that came up in like conversations.
If I figured I was being haunted, I would not go blurting out my fears, I think. Right? Would you?
I mean, maybe one of her many children was like, hey, don't do that. Mom's afraid of fire. Or something, right?
Hey, don't touch the stove. Mommy told me that her number one fear is us all burning to death in our sleep, so don't do that. And the ghost was like, aha.
Noted.
The ghost just has a mole
I
feeding
mean, I
information.
don't think it's a mole. I think they're literally just in the house always and can hear everything
Yeah,
you
it's
say.
like how your NSA agent, Pip, knows everything about you. Finally, exhausted and terrified, they contacted the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine were already famous in the right circles, and they showed up pretty quickly to the house to investigate. Lorraine, upon being told of the wound in Carolyn's leg, immediately said that it was the work of Bathsheba, and even worse, said that Carolyn was already possessed. They tried a seance, and not only did it not work, it just made the spirits angrier. After several attempts at this, the Warrens were asked politely, but firmly, to leave.
It's like the flies, dude. Don't get rid of them. They'll just get fucking mad.
Well, then you're interacting with it, right? That's giving it power, I think.
No. No.
I think that's part of it, right? If you interact with like a spirit, you acknowledge their existence and it makes them stronger.
I think that there's some faiths and belief systems where, yeah, that's a thing with spirits. If you interact with or acknowledge them, or say their name, or give them a name. Now, these activities continued for years, until eventually the parents moved out. They literally lived with these incursions for years. Roger mostly only had pleasant experiences, like soft touches and caresses, other than like the fly stuff and the bad smell. But the really scary...
A nice sensual ghost.
Yeah, Bathsheba liked him. The real scary and painful stuff was reserved for Carolyn and the kids. Now...
Well, that's the MO.
Now, to close up on this one, here's the problems with this story. For one, we know that Bathsheba Sherman was a real person. That's a fact. But I can't find any record of her being accused of infanticide. Her local minister even gave her a eulogy when she died, which usually is not a nicety that's given to people accused of killing babies. In fact, almost all of the information that Carolyn gives is basically incorrect, where she talks about, oh, this person died on the property in this place, and this person died in this place. There were family members that had lived in the house previously that had died, but almost all of them had died off the farm, you know, in normal life events. There wasn't anything particularly haunted about this farm in terms of deaths there. The other problem that I have is the involvement of the Warrens, like we talked about earlier. I don't think the Warrens are to be trusted, personally. Opinion of them ranges generally from well-meaning but incorrect elderly couple to outright borderline criminal charlatans. My favorite review of them is one skeptic who said, if Lorraine Warren told me that the sun would rise tomorrow, I would want a second opinion.
Ooh, that's a pretty damning review.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my issue with it, too. Like, I've heard a lot of things about the Warrens, and none of them are good. It's always, like, cash grabby, you know, let's just fake a haunting to make some money off it sort of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what this kind of fucking screams to me. Like, if it was just the ghost of the woman trying to kill her children or something, sure. But the fact that it's like you just have like an inventory of ghosts just chilling out in the house, you know, doing their own thing. That's when you're like, okay, like you're just making one up for every day of the fucking week, dude.
Yeah.
There's no way this is real.
And the lady that lived in the house afterwards actually did sue the movie company that made The Conjuring, because after the movie came out, there was a bunch of trespassing onto her property, and she was like, there's no ghost activity here, guys. This is just a house. Stop coming to my yard. So, that's that also. And for me, this story really lacks the credibility of the Hill encounter from last episode.
For sure.
I can't discount this one because I wasn't there, but it doesn't hit that emotional part of my brain the same way.
It doesn't feel
like,
as
so for me,
earnest.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, that's the point I was making. It feels a lot less earnest than like the Hill encounters, right?
Yeah, like for me, like the Hill accounts and everything, like you believed that they believed it, right? Whether it happened or not, like they definitely experienced something. This just feels like we're just gonna throw a bunch of shit and see what sticks, and then we'll roll with that.
Yeah. I will give, though, that like all the kids have maintained that this was all real and happened. I believe that Carolyn also maintained the story. I know I wasn't there. A lot of these the details are really interesting and creepy to me. The screaming "This house smells like death" is scary. I wouldn't want my dad screaming that.
Yeah,
it's a little fucked up.
Maybe this.
I mean, it sounds like the ghosts were kind of affecting him as well, just like sending him flying off the handle. Maybe, I don't know.
Or the classic like Amityville style
Yeah, it just kind of makes someone a little more unhinged. Just kind of generate fear.
Makes
Increase
sense.
your ghost points, your GP.
I don't feel like the father needed any help being unhinged, bro. Be real with
Yeah,
it.
he thought the Vietnam War was a good idea.
That wasn't a ghost opinion. That was his opinion.
That was all him.
No, that was ghostception.
Anyways, everybody, thank you all for listening to this week's episode. We hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Please follow us on Twitter at _pod. That's OOTA_POD for updates. And join us on Patreon at patreon.com/UTAP. That's patreon.com/OOTAP. Thanks again for everyone involved in production. Thanks to my beautiful, wonderful co-hosts. And thanks, of course, to all of you listening. Have a good night. And remember, everything has an element of the unknown. Good night.